It's the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, and one story, one series has jumped to the front of the line. The eliminated Toronto Maple Leafs, who lost their opening matchup to Boston. Toronto isn't playing, but they are the number one story. The players spoke, the coach was fired, and the executives talked. Now it's our turn. John Shannon joins me for a deep dive after another disappointing spring in Toronto.
Boys, I'm Mike today. Just let everyone know, don't say anything stupid.
That's a disgrace! That's a disgrace! What a joke!
Hit him, light him up.
Yeah, nice hit!
That's solid.
What are you gonna do?
You guys are sensitive over there.
You know, in a lot of ways, all that chirping in the opening reminds me of conversations that I have with our guest this week. I'll introduce him in just a little bit. But the Toronto Maple Leafs lost in the first round again, actually regressing from winning their only series in the last 20 years a year ago. And it's been a week-long event in Toronto. Normally, teams do this in one day. Players talk, coach talk, manager talks, and then it's out of the way. Toronto's turned this into a news cycle that's going to go on more than 10 days, and it's been fascinating to watch. That's why we bring in John Shannon, who has worked for MLSE and worked around the National Hockey League and watched the Toronto Maple Leafs for as long as any of us can remember. So you are the go-to guy on this. Give us your, from 40,000 feet, what you've thought of this week for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
You mean Leafapalooza?
Yes, that's a good one.
Well, it feels like it. It's prolonging the agony. And in so many ways, when you consider losing on Saturday, exit interviews Monday with the coach, fire the coach Thursday, president, general manager, and CEO of the parent company sit on Friday. And you would hope at some point that the news cycle is over for the Maple Leafs as we try to focus on the Stanley Cup playoffs, but it's never over in Toronto. This is a 12-month-a-year saga that is ever-changing. The rumors are going to start. You know, today's messages that everything is going to be discussed. Okay, there we go. Mitch Marner's going to be discussed. You know, they're going to find a goaltender. It's going to be discussed. Everything you media people have talked about, we've talked about. I think the goal today was, quite frankly, Darren, was to get out of the cycle without creating any controversy today. And for all intents and purposes, they did that. The real... I think there was an underlying hope to figure out what Brendan Shanahan's role was going forward. That's pretty straightforward now, as the Keith Pelly, the new CEO, said that he is the president of the club. And I think that's, you know, we expected heads to roll. Sheldon Keith's head rolled. And I think there were people thinking that Brendan Shanahan's head would roll as well.
Okay. So let's work backwards.
Lots to digest, I know, and that was a run-on sentence, I know.
No, it's beautiful. It's an opening statement that gives us a little glimpse into everything. But the freshest news was the fact that the CEO spoke alongside the president of the hockey club and the general manager.
Yeah.
Did anything come out of today that was any different than we've heard for the last 19 years?
Well, not really.
No, because I heard patience, but then maybe it's not time for patience anymore. Speed it up. Like they had all the right talking points, but I'm not sure anything new came about of it. And I'm not sure there is anything new to come out of it.
And I think that's the challenge. I mean, we're still in last year. We're not in next year. We're still in last year. So could you announce who your new coach was? You could have announced who your new coach was, but they're not ready yet. They did need to announce the firing of the previous coach, Sheldon Keefe, before today in order to make today feel like something was new. So that's why he was dismissed yesterday. I think that let's face it, it was spin. It was all spin. But I think that in many ways, trying to reassure a hardcore fan base that feels really abused right now, really abused. Anywhere you go, we're not talking about paper bags, we're not talking about waffles, we're not talking about throwing jerseys on the ice, but we're talking about a fan base that has committed so much of their own time, of their own money. This is an expensive ticket in this town. And they got nothing to show for it. Again. The group of players that were supposed to lead them to the promised land haven't been able to do it. The only positive of the playoff series is that William Nylander scored 3 goals. In fact, scored the last 3 goals for this team this season. But there wasn't much else to hold on to. There really wasn't. Goaltending is not in great shape. Defense is not in great shape. The depth is not in great shape. What do you do with John Tavares with 1 year left on that giant deal that in many ways people are pointing to that was and don't laugh, but the beginning of the end of what this group was supposed to be? Because the moment you gave Tavares $11 million, you knew you were giving at least 3 other guys similar money, if not more. And it's crippled them to be able to go out and compete in the free agent market. It's crippled them in many ways because there was so much money with those 4 players. But the words of Brad Treliving about culture, about building chemistry, about championships, Keith Pelley about building unity, that's all they are now, is words, because the fan base is, I mean, I know I was with a group of media guys, but you could hear the eyes roll because they've heard it before. I mean, a year ago, they made trades with great character players like Ryan O'Reilly to come in to change things, Luke Schenn to change things, and they didn't sign here again. Wasn't that enough of a message about what was going on in Toronto, about chemistry? Perhaps it was.
So how would you describe the state of the Toronto Maple Leafs hockey club right now?
Numbed, traumatized, because there is a lot of work to be done, a lot of heavy lifting to be done in order to regain the confidence of a passionate fan base. And I do think, one of the challenges when you talk about how things have been Monday to Friday here, I do think that there was a lot of people saying they're going to say something important on Friday. Something big is going to happen on Friday. Well, nothing big happened. And I think if you spoke to those 3 gentlemen and people inside the organization after the press conference, they would say, well, we got out of that okay. We solved, we didn't solve any problems, but we didn't create any more. If you know what I mean. And they didn't. There was no controversial moments about like we saw last year, this organization with Kyle Dubas talking about his family and the issues. Again, by the way, I think that was a Tuesday to a Friday scenario last year with Kyle Dubas, and then with Brendan Shanahan coming in to say that Kyle would not be back by the end of the week.
Yeah, it does look like a more united front office front than we've seen before. But, and while it was a 7-game series, are the Leafs that much worse off this year than they were last year just by not making or winning that 1 game? It feels like it, and I'm not sure it should.
I don't know, because this is Groundhog Day. The only guy missing at the dais today was Bill Murray. This happens every year at this time. And sure, last year was, beat Tampa, but then losing 5 to Florida. There is so much to digest with what's going on. And so much of it points to the guy who has been with the organization for 5 weeks. Keith Pelley is the new president and CEO of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, the parent company. He's a Torontonian. He's been living in Europe for the last 9 years. Has come back with a huge resume of running a golf tour over there, but also running Canadian TV networks before he left for Europe. But this is a different animal now, and as he's described it to me and others, it's like drinking through a fire hose right now. Everything he has to learn. I was surprised to actually see him today, in many ways, to see him up there. But I think
Why was he there?
Well,
I'm curious.
This is his first public appearance to talk about anything inside the organization. Now, he has been done radio interviews, has done our show, by the way, but this was the first time in front of a media throng that was looking for blood, and I think that there was a real feel and desire on his part that he has to put a new face on this franchise, that he has to put new responsibilities in place. And I think after his first foray into the press conference, I think he did okay. Did he do great? Were people walking out inspired? No. But I think he put in place that, the Truman line, the buck stops here. Well, we know where the buck stops now, because in Toronto for so long, Darren, and you know this after living here, is the board of directors who run the hockey club. And this has been true for a long period of time in Toronto. The board of directors are faceless, nameless, faceless people that control the largest sports franchise and one of the largest sports franchises in North America. Now there's a person that's in charge. And that, I think, is the reason why he spoke today.
Want to get into the coaching situation as well as the players and the future of that core four, whether we learn anything about that today. But one thing I noticed, or one thing that was absent today, there is no back and forth. There is no testiness with the media. It was missing. And that spoke volumes to me.
They have no right to be testy with the media. They have no.
But the media wasn't even pushing it. Like, it was almost like, all right, let's get through this and we'll go.
I thought there were some tough questions, and there were some tough questions to Keith about, is Brendan your guy? Why is he your guy? And to Brendan, what is your contract situation? Are you going to be a lame duck president? I don't know what else, because I think that was the expectation today, was we were going to get a little insight into leadership. We weren't going to be talking about Bobby McMahon's injury very much. We weren't going to be talking about William Nylander. We were talking about leadership today. And the two words that kept coming up were chemistry and unity. But to me, this was a test of Brendan Shanahan's position as president of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Confirmation that he's going to be the
it
president,
is now.
right?
I mean, hey, all week long here in Toronto was that, when is Brendan going? Are they going to get rid of Brendan? There were suppositions coming out that Brendan will, take a step back. Well, I don't see Brendan taking a step back. And I think that's what today was. It was confirmation that, and Keith said it, he's the CEO. He will support the hockey operations group, and Brendan and Brad run the hockey operations group.
So now they go to work trying to find a new head coach and go through that process. Interesting that they said they're going to take their time, but they're also aware that there's other openings and there's qualified and very credible candidates out there. And you don't want to lose somebody to another team if you can avoid it. Is there a name that jumps to the forefront to you? I have one, but I'm curious to hear from you.
Well, I have two.
Okay.
And I think that I think the consensus would be that as a former Maple Leaf, Craig Berube would be the coach. He's a Stanley Cup champion coach. He's out there. But this is where, Joel Quenneville has to come back to the game sometime.
That was the name I was going to bring up.
Joel Quenneville has to come back to the game sometime. You know, this leadership group has a great relationship with the commissioner. I would be on a plane if it was me. I'd be on the owner's plane. I'd be on Larry Tannenbaum's plane with Brendan Shanahan and Brad Treliving and Keith Pelley, and I'd be taking Gary to Del Fresco's and say, Gary, we need a favor. We need a favor. The Toronto Maple Leafs need a favor. Would you please find a way in your wisdom to give us a chance to hire a former Maple Leaf, a Stanley Cup champion coach who deserves a second chance, and that's Joel Quenneville. How do you like that speech? That was a good speech, huh?
It was good.
Yeah.
Did you read off a prompter there?
We don't use prompters in hockey. But and the only reason I say that, every once in a while, see, when I worked for the Leafs, this was one of my pet peeves when I worked there, is the league would push us around. The league would say, well, we need you to do this, and we're the Toronto Maple Leafs, man. We're a huge franchise. We give more money into revenue sharing than any other team in the league. We are Saturday Night Hockey in this country. We're the Toronto Maple Leafs. We need a favor. We need a favor. And Joel Quenneville, as a former Leaf, would be the right guy at the right time for this franchise.
So you think he's the number one candidate if everything's equal?
Yeah. Boy, here's the thing. I think there are 15 or 16 teams that think that, though. I mean, there are lots of, you know, if I'm Ron Francis, I'm getting on a plane that David Bonderman gave me and flying to New York to talk to Gary about, can I talk to Joel? You know, it has to, I would hope that it has to end sometime. And I do believe that Joel and has worked closely with people in the league office to make it happen and find a way to have Joel come back to the game.
I just wondered whether Toronto was too high profile. I'm with you that Quenneville should be the guy, and Craig Berube right there, but Quenneville's won multiple cups. Yeah.
I think both were good. I think Joel has a better resume. And I think Joel understands his role, and what better place to give an example to somebody who had a second chance than in Toronto. I think you could peel that onion so many different ways, Darren. Too high profile. Hey, listen, there's only 32 of the jobs in North America, so why not here?
Did Sheldon Keefe deserve to be the fall guy?
I think that's inevitable. I think that when you look at the way professional sports, not just hockey, but professional sports works, there's a fulcrum. How's that? There's a fulcrum, and the coach is the fulcrum, and so he's the hinge, and the hinge gets worn out. The players have negotiated themselves into a place where they can't be moved. They make too much money. And senior management has to set the tone, the editorial tone of an organization. And you can't be changing the president or the general manager too often in those situations. So stability has to occur someplace. And the one place where that stability becomes a real challenge is in the coaching position. And it's one of the good things that's happened in the last 5 or 6 years is that coaches are finally getting compensated for having such short shelf lives.
You used the word stability.
Yeah.
Maple Leafs have a new CEO, MLSE.
Yeah.
They've changed the manager and now the coach, all within the last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and that leaves Brendan Shanahan as the last man standing, and the guy that is the continuation. Brent, listen, there's lots of things, and winning is the only thing, but there are lots of things in this organization that Brendan.
Hold on. What's winning with the Toronto Maple Leafs?
Well, no, there's only one winning.
No, it's not. I disagree with that. They've won one playoff series in 20 years. Getting to the second round may not have been the ultimate, but it would have pacified a lot of people. Getting to a conference final would have put everybody over the moon. I don't think the Stanley Cup or bust thing doesn't wash with me when you've only won one series in 20 years.
With the talent on that hockey club, they should be a heck of a lot closer than they are. But you have the ultimate goal is to win the Stanley Cup. The ultimate goal is to play in the last game of the season. And the Leafs are far from that. But that can't not be the goal. There have been a lot of great players, a lot of great coaches that have fallen short in their careers because they still have been unable to put the Stanley Cup on their resume. That's the ultimate goal. That is winning.
You think going into the season, the legitimate goal is to win the Stanley Cup there? Like that's the focus.
Don't you think that's a realistic goal for 20 teams? Don't you think the 16 teams that made the playoffs in the back of their minds saying we can do what LA did in 2012, get in and win? I think
there's a lot of teams that say we'd love to do that. We hope to do that, but if you don't have that in your belly, you should not be in a position to be coaching, playing, or managing in this league. Winning the Stanley Cup is all that matters. I think that's an easy thing to say.
I had a difficult time putting it together.
You're kind of feisty today. By the way, there's a lot of people that paused the podcast a couple of minutes ago and had to look up. Was it Fulcrum that you offered up?
Yeah, Fulcrum.
Yeah. They had to look that up, and now they're back with us. Okay. So
I'm sorry, I will stop you. You know, I always tell people, and I've told people on this show before, do not use words larger than marmalade. So I will stop.
Players, do you have the big four, the core four? Did we learn anything about the future of that roster as it relates to half the salary cap being paid to a small group of players?
No, we didn't, because they wouldn't contemplate names. But what I would say is that they know something has to change.
So you think it will be different? Totally.
You know, the top heaviness of the roster has to change. The philosophy of where you know, Brad Treliving does have a different philosophy than Kyle Dubas. That's the most important thing to look at. There needs to be improvement on defense. There does need to be improvement in goal. I do think Joseph Woll's a good goaltender if he could stay healthy. If you could wrap him in bubble wrap, then maybe he's got a chance.
That Glenn Healy took care of that by slimming down the goalie equipment.
That wasn't Glenn Healy. Kay Whitmore. That was Kay Whitmore.
I know, but Glenn was part of those meetings, and he was advocate. He was an advocate to let's trim down the goalie equipment. I remember seeing all the video clips. Glenn's like, "You're wearing that? I'm wearing this. This is crazy."
Yeah. Well, but there are obvious things that need to improve, and they need money to do that. And so you need to find. You either do that by buying players out, which nobody's going to do, or by trading and getting valuable resources back. Somebody will salivate over the opportunity to get Mitch Marner. Somebody will say, I can make Marner a champion in this league. And hopefully the Maple Leafs can get something back that will help this team in other areas.
So 3 of the core 4, 4 of the core 4, or would you consider something drastically different as cutting the core 4 in half?
Well, Auston Matthews won the Rocket Richard Trophy this year, 69 goals. He's nominated as one of the best defensive forwards in the National Hockey League. That's another story for another day. I
hate that trophy, by the way.
Why?
We should be promoting offense. I don't want to get sidetracked, but we should be promoting offense. Put in a Best Offensive Defenseman Award and get rid of the Best Defensive Forward Award. Anyway.
Or both. We need more silverware.
That award show goes on. Sorry, Steve. But the award show goes, Steve Mayer, the award show goes on long enough. He doesn't need more trophies. So what would you do with the core 4?
Trade Marner and find a way to manage Tavares for another year.
He's not going anywhere.
I don't think so either. So, but put him in a place to succeed. And I don't that now those are words that could have been used at the press conference, but
Were his numbers not fine this year?
they were
I know.
okay. They were okay.
We all, at the end of these contracts, you're always going to have dropping production.
Yeah.
But the numbers are pretty good.
But what is he now, though? See, in my mind, I hate to say it, he's a quality third line center.
Yeah, but you knew
Yeah.
that when you signed him. You were saddled with that. I was
Well,
there.
but
I
remember-
talked to John the day he was signed on Sportsnet, and it was a celebration. The pajamas, everything. You knew that this was going to happen. Everybody knows that this is going to happen with these contracts.
So, but can you trade him and carry half of the dollars, get something back in return? Is there somebody that thinks they can get more mileage out of Tavares? It's a good question. I tell you what, I like Nylander. I think Nylander's a really good player, and I don't think you can move Austin Matthews. I think you have to have cornerstone players. But you look at the rest of it, there's not as much there as you think there is. And they need a quality puck moving defenseman, if not two. And boy, oh boy. So I think we've probably changed 6 positions already for next year.
Mhm.
And we haven't even talked about re-signing Bertuzzi or Domi.
On the goaltending front, it was brushed over. Like nobody followed up on it, but Samsonov's gone.
He's an unrestricted free agent.
Yeah.
So
Marner versus Matthews. Who would you take?
am I the Leaf manager or I'm the opposition manager?
You're the Leaf manager.
Oh, you're taking Austin Matthews.
Okay. Because Marner has shown points in his time in Toronto where I think he's more valuable than Austin Matthews. As crazy as that sounds. Just the
I don't think it
versatility.
sounds crazy at all. But I think I think
With a guy with 69 goals, it sounds crazy.
but players sometimes wear out their welcome. This is a hard town to play in.
Okay,
if-
Marner or Nylander?
Oh, see, I'm keeping Nylander. I'm keeping Nylander. Marner has a year left on his deal, so they can actually sign him to an extension after July 1st. So are we looking at a comparable scenario to Matthew Tkachuk, finding a quality player or two somewhere else, signing Marner to a Leaf contract so you can get him in the 8th year, and then moving him to that team? Are we doing the sign and trade with Mitch Marner this summer? I think that it's fascinating. There was more fervor at this time of year about when it happened with Matthew Tkachuk after Goodrow signed in Columbus. The Matthew Tkachuk, it was a whirlwind of discussions all around the NHL. That hasn't happened here with Marner. Why hasn't it happened with Marner? Because Marner's in exactly the same thing, exactly the same scenario. 1 year,
Marner's a hometown boy and loves playing for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He, rightly or wrongly, was criticized for saying they're treated like gods.
Oh no! Listen,
which
listen,
they were.
I have no issue with what Mitch Marner said.
I don't either.
I have no issue with what he said.
I don't either.
I do have issue with the way he plays the game at times. I don't, back it up. You can say whatever you want. Back it up all the time. The other question you have with Marner is, is how bad was that high ankle sprain? How long was he at how close to 100% was he in the playoffs? And you know how bad high ankle sprains could be, Darren. They could take 6 months to recover from. So that's a question that not many people have really looked into as well. And is that enough of an excuse? We had Nylander miss games, we had Matthews miss games, we had Marner miss a late part of the season with this high ankle sprain and then come back and wasn't the same.
Yeah.
And we'd go, so what do you rack that up to? This team, but this team does not have enough character. This team does not have enough grit. And I'm not talking Ryan Reeves. I'm talking about grit. I mean, I watched the Vancouver Canucks play game 1 against Edmonton. Oh my goodness gracious.
Well, that goes right into what Brad Treliving said, we can score goals in the regular season. We have to find different ways to score goals in the playoffs.
And I don't want to tell people, but Dakota Joshua used to be a Toronto Maple Leaf. You know,
Love him.
now he's one of the key parts of that Canuck success out there. And they are, and Connor Garland. Oh my goodness. Little feisty guys. That's why I like Max Domi. I'd sign Max Domi. He's the one.
Do you think the players in that Leaf room are advocating some kind of change on their roster? Or do you, that's an unfair question. Do you think they realize that change is needed?
Well, but there's two groups of guys. There's guys that don't have contracts like Domi and Bertuzzi. And then there are guys that are set for life in Nylander and Matthews.
Do you think they realize there's got to be something done with allocating that much money?
I think that's the real,
even though they're
question.
Part of that.
I think that's the real question. I think that's the real issue about all this. Do they want to win bad enough? They're set for life, Darren. More money than ever. Do they want to win bad enough? Will they sacrifice enough to win? You know, and who's going to call them on it? Who's going to make it worth their while? Those are questions. I mean, one of the things that bothered me out of the exit meetings is that, sure, Sheldon Keefe said, I'm responsible. I take full responsibility. I didn't see many players take responsibility. I did not see players take responsibility, and they have to take responsibility at some point. So there's something in the DNA of this group of players in this town where they do get treated like gods that has to change. Has to change for this team to get over the hump.
The term is generational wealth. It's one of my favorites.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah.
That's something that I have never had.
You've had generations.
Yeah.
Just not the wealth part.
No wealth.
What's your favorite second round series?
I right now, I mean, I really, the Vancouver Edmonton series is wacko. I mean, it is right there in your face. Two fan bases that are spitting blood, you know, two teams that at times have been the best teams in the game this year. And constructed totally differently. Quality people in the front office. I mean, Jim Rutherford and Kenny Holland are two of my favorite people. And they're going toe to toe. It is, and there is something special, and my bias of being Canadian, there is something special of having a Canadian matchup with two cities that really love their hockey more than anything else. It's cool. I mean, there are people lining up 4 and 5 hours before the game, you know, on a school night, just to get a chance to get a ticket. Maybe it's, to me, and it's going to be a great series, you know. And Connor's got to show up in game 2, but you know, it's going to be a great series.
The way, you know, Kenny Holland and Jim Rutherford just call you for a ticket. You're the man with all.
No, I'm the other way around. I should be calling them for tickets.
Are the New York Rangers as good as they appear to be through the first round and 3 games?
Igor Shesterkin sure is. You know, good goaltending solves it, and they are, you know, they're big, they're mean, they're fast, they're everything. I mean, they've done a magnificent job there in constructing a team. You know, they can play the game any way you want, and that's. But
they get outplayed more often than their record would indicate.
Yeah, but that's why their goaltender is so valuable. You know, that's why. Can you imagine? Just as an aside, since 1990, the New York Rangers goaltenders, for all intents and purposes, have been Mike Richter, Henrik Lundqvist, Igor Shesterkin. 3 goalies in 34 years. That's phenomenal.
You know who was supposed to be right in the middle?
Dan Blackburn.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he hurt himself training.
Yeah.
And that opened the door for Henrik Lundqvist, the 2-blocker Dan.
Yeah. No, it was, but Danny.
Those 3 guys. Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing. when you talk about building cornerstones of your franchise, and you can say, well, we don't have a problem in goal because we got a guy for 12 years. And we got another guy for 12 years after that, another guy for another 12 years. It's phenomenal.
It's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah,
You
well, it
hire
used to be.
somebody, you keep
That's
them
right.
around.
That's right. That's right.
Comment on Rod Brind'Amour. Does what's happened very close, and last year, I'll talk about it in a little bit, but he said it wasn't a sweep, even though it was a sweep, because it was so close. And the way it's played out now, does that affect his future there at all? Do you think?
I don't think so. I mean,
I was wondering that.
Roddy loves the area. You know, it's a great place to live, great place to raise a family. You know, but the Carolina Hurricanes are doing Carolina Hurricane things. You know, can't score key goals at key times. That, you know, there certainly has to be some frustration. I'm with Don Waddell and with Tom Dundon about what's right and wrong with it. But every year they think they make enough changes to get some more goal scoring or beef up their goaltending. I don't, you know, and Freddie got them to this point. You know, the other guy, Kochetkov, is going to probably end up finishing the series now. But in the end, it's about scoring and it's about goal scoring and you know, Jake Gensel was supposed to solve that problem.
Yeah, power play.
You know, and so it's the same old story in Carolina.
You're a tough guy.
No, I'm not.
You got a presence around you. If I gave you a Florida Panthers sweater and gave you a front row ticket to TD Garden, but you have to wear the sweater to go in there, would you wear it?
Oh, in a second. In a second.
Really?
In fact, I'd be doing the belly bump on the glass like the guy in Dallas. And I'd be doing, I'd be, you know, why not?
Sign guy?
So
Well, I ask you that because in 2011, the Stanley Cup final, the Sportsnet panel is outside TD Garden doing our pre and post game. And after the games in Boston, we had to turn off the lights a couple of times because people were throwing rocks at us because they knew we were Canadian TV. And they won those games, John. They won the games in Boston. And I looked at Kipper and said, imagine if they would have lost these games. I'm not sure I'm wearing another team's jersey in there.
So you remember
it's so feisty right now.
Oh, so you remember when Washington and Pittsburgh and Ovi and Sid were the great rivalry and all that?
Yeah.
I was working for the league and my daughter was a giant Pittsburgh Penguin fan. There's Sid Crosby stuff in this room because of her. And so after game 4 in Pittsburgh, I had to go to Washington. So I said, well, I'll take a couple of days off school. Come with me. I'll get you a ticket and you can sit in the seats and watch the Penguins win again. And so we drove to Washington from Pittsburgh and we had a couple of days there. And there she was in the first row of the balcony at Verizon Center, a sea of red and this bright yellow Sidney Crosby sweater. She only got hit with water bottles twice. So she was 14.
We laugh. We laugh.
But she laughs about it now.
Our kids getting
But you could see her. I think I have a picture somewhere. There's all these red sweaters. And then there's this bright yellow one. You know, those bright yellow Penguin ones they had for a couple of years? Anyway, so there's my daughter doing there.
One of my wife's favorite things was sitting with Maya during the Winter Classic in Pittsburgh in the rain.
Winter Classic and All-Star game in Ottawa, too. They said.
Yes. Yes, you're right about that.
I'd prefer to sit with Jen and you, too. So
that was mean.
Well,
I would like you to take that back.
If I'm going into TD Garden with my Panther sweater on, I got to be mean, man.
That's been fun. I love the coaches going at it too. Over a change goalie, over Allmark taking his time going in. They went at it over that in a game that was lopsided.
And how about Jim Montgomery? I mean, so what if they'd lost?
Did you see him yawn?
Oh yeah. Well, I'd be
like right in the middle of the chaos. He's like,
I'd be tired too. But how about Jim Montgomery? You have to wonder about what's going on in Boston because let's face it, they lose to the Maple Leafs. There's a good chance Jim Montgomery's relieved of his duties, right? There's a good chance. Well, I don't know if you remember 2011, but if the Bruins lose to Montreal in the first round in Game 7, Paul Julian's going to be fired.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to be gone. And they win that series. They go on to win the Stanley Cup, and Claude Julien is a Stanley Cup champion and will be a hero in Boston for the rest of his life.
Is it true that Claude Julien was granted permission to talk to the Tampa Bay Lightning 1 year before the Stanley Cup? Couldn't come to terms, so he went back to Boston?
I don't know that.
Okay. I asked that because could Mike Sullivan be traded to the Toronto Maple Leafs and Sheldon Keefe just coaches the Pittsburgh Penguins, reunites with Kyle Dubas?
No. I mean, you can't actually, I don't think you can trade a player anymore or trade a coach anymore, I think.
Because Fred Scheer was traded, right?
Yeah, 1979, you got the Rangers. Yeah.
Michel Bergeron was traded. The Rangers acquired a couple of coaches.
The Rangers thought they could do anything. They were owned by a big corporation. They tried to do anything to
And
win.
Mike Keenan left, but that wasn't a trade really. But I wasn't sure whether you could still trade coaches or not.
I don't
didn't
think
so, but-
I don't think you can. I don't think. In fact, remember the compensation for coaches has disappeared now too, right?
Oh yeah.
So that's a different world.
I thought it was a
world now.
good angle though.
Well, Mike Sullivan's such a good coach. Why
I know.
Why would Pittsburgh even consider allowing that?
Because they're at the end of the
stop it.
window. Like put him in Toronto where he
Stop.
can.
Stop it. You're starting like a Leaf fan now.
I like to channel my thoughts through the listener, like through the listener's lens.
Hmm.
Did you just tell me to stop in my own podcast?
Yeah, I did.
I'm not sure that's proper etiquette.
There's etiquette on a podcast.
What's the name of your podcast? Because you guys had Keith Pelly on.
The Bob McCown podcast. It's in the library. The Bob McCown podcast. Keith was on a couple of Mondays ago.
Check it out. John, love you like a brother.
Always happy to help out our friends on the Chirp.
Now there's a guy. Like if you need something on something, you reach out to John Shannon. Like something is code for anything, and the topic could be multitude of different angles. John Shannon's your guy. TV, media, been around the hockey scene in Toronto forever, Canada. He is a perfect guest to dissect what's going on in the land of the Toronto Maple Leafs right now. Thank you for that, Mr. Shannon, even though you told me to stop it or shut up or whatever. We don't use the word shut up around my house. All right, some second-round musings. Got into a little bit with John there, but the playoffs are experiencing what I would call a Benjamin Button-type journey right now. They're going in reverse. Now, normally the playoffs start at a very frenetic pace, and they get a little more conservative or buttoned down as they move along round by round. Well, toss that out, at least early on, because based on the second round, we're just cranking things up. Great leads have been established, threatening and bordering on blowouts before being answered by breathtaking comebacks and rallies. And it's really opened old wounds in Edmonton. We'll see what happens with the rest of the series. But I'm curious if Game 1 will turn out to be a teaching moment for the Edmonton Oilers or the start down a very familiar path. I also love the competitiveness, the intensity, the scraps, the battles in this second round. It's what we see, the hype promos that the league and all the networks produce. Beautiful voiceover and all that footage of guys with Bob Clark, blood dripping down the side of his face. Scott Stevens looking over at the bench saying you're next. We've witnessed the hype video in both Eastern Conference series. I'm a little shocked, though, the Rangers lead 3-0. I didn't think Carolina would just compete in this second-round series. I thought the Hurricanes would prevail. Everything that they did this year, and then the addition, John mentioned Jake Gensel, I thought they were poised for a breakthrough and to get to a Stanley Cup final. That was my pick here. But this is just really similar. I mentioned it with John. The Rod Brindamore quote from the 4-game loss to Florida last year wasn't a sweep, phrasing it that way because it was so close. Well, the matchup against New York, the Rangers has opened with 3 more painfully close defeats. Carolina's better. They're better. But in reality, they're still just 1 goal per game short. Their power play carries responsibility for it this time. It starts and finishes with a man advantage. In particular, 0 for 10 in the first 2 games in 1-goal losses. Really, that's where it comes home to roost. Best player so far, Stanley Cup playoffs. I've got best player, best goalie, best coach. Best player in the playoffs, Vincent Trocheck of the New York Rangers. He's right there with the two-headed superstars with the Edmonton Oilers, but he's got 5 goals. He's had an impact. And the former Carolina Hurricane. And he is making things happen right now with the New York Rangers. Awesome stuff. 5 goals, 12 points. Vincent Trocheck having an impact. Best goaltender, not going back-to-back with the New York Rangers. All due respect to Igor Shesterkin, but it's Jeremy Swayman winning the 7-game series against the Toronto Maple Leafs. He was in for 6 of them and then has been really spectacular to carry it over against the Florida Panthers. I love what we're seeing here. It's going to have a trickle-down effect to what the Boston Bruins do with their roster going forward. But Jeremy Swayman, and he does it uniquely. He's got a couple of safe selections that maybe the person that doesn't follow goaltending wouldn't notice right away, but he plays it traditionally, but he also adds in certain elements that you go, oh, that is different. I shouldn't necessarily think to do that, but it works. So awesome stuff. And best coach is Rick Tocchet with the Vancouver Canucks. Gets through the first round and then pushes it forward and doubles down with a good start. With he's just pressing all the right buttons. He's dealt with the 3 goaltenders in the first round, and he made the change in the second. He's just got this poise and honesty about him that I think players would just run to play for. Awesome stuff with Rick Tocchet, and looking forward to see what he does with that upstart Western Conference top seed, not the number 1 seed, but number 2 seed in the Western Conference, and they won the Pacific Division, and I still call them an upstart team. Thanks to John Shannon, thanks to Bob Bender for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week. We'll see what is new on the Toronto Maple Leafs front, but we'll get back to a more focused playoff conversation on the Chirp Podcast with Darren Millard.